Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Blooms and Beyond podcast that uncovers plant history, culture, and management through the lens of science. I'm your host, Dr. Ping Yu. How's everyone doing today? I am doing great because here I have one of my favorite people, my dear horticulturist colleagues and friends, and also my boss, Dr. Leonardo Lombardini, here with me today on the show. And we're going to talk about one of the most fun and exciting topics, coffee. I know folks out there who's listening to this episode, many of you may, like me, who has to start my day with a cup of coffee. And our speaker today is an expert on coffee with many years of research experience and, of course, tons of fascinating stories and a lot of scientific knowledge to share today and to help us understand the coffee in a different level. So I don't want to steal any more thunder from our speaker today. Let's just jump right into it. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Leo Lombardini. I hope you enjoy it. So, hey, Leo, welcome to the podcast.
Yes.
First, let's start off with the introduction. Can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, of course. It's my pleasure, and thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very excited about this opportunity. My name is Leonardo Lombardini. I am currently the head of the Horticulture Department here at the University of Georgia. I've had this position since 2019. I'm a native Italian. I grew up in Tuscany, grew up in Florence, and then I came to the United States long time ago, 30 years ago, to work on my PhD, Michigan State University, and then moved around the country a lot. I spent a lot of time at Texas A&M, just like you. That's where we met and became very, very acquainted and close. And then, of course, even more so since you joined UGA. So it's a pleasure. It's all full circle and all here for the love of horticulture.
Yeah, and I still remember vividly when I was a grad student at Texas A&M attending the plant physiology class when you were lecturing, and one of your, two of your students, PhD students, are actually a very good friend of, a very close friend of mine. It's kind of how, well, exciting and magical how we kind of circle back working for the same department. But as you mentioned, you grew up in Italy, and but what first sparked your interest in horticulture? Are you seeing yourself as a nature kid when you grew up, or how did this come to your radar and well become one of your interests or own when you grew up, or you kind of stumble through to this trajectory?
Yes, I grew up in the city in Florence, so I did not come from a family that was involved in agriculture, but I attribute my interest as a young kid to the fact that my parents, they bought a very old farmhouse in Tuscany in the late 60s and fixed it up. And one of the things that they did was actually resurrect an abandoned vineyard and olive trees. So with a lot of sweat and hard work and help with, from family, extended family to have pruning days or harvest days, they were able to, again, resurrect this vineyard, and they would start making wine, learning from scratch by asking around and trial and error. And I was there as a little kid helping harvest and see how the grape juice turned into wine. And of course, I would not try, or maybe I did, but we don't have to say. And that's also spending a lot of weekends and summers in this house, which is still in the family, actually, extended family. My cousins own it now. But the summers were days of finding ways to stay engaged and stay busy. This was pre-video games, pre-computers. So I had to find things to entertain myself in that had to do with nature, whether it was planting trees or playing with the chicken. And I think that's really what's triggered the interest in plants and observe and grow and develop and give fruits and vegetables and all that.
Yeah, yeah. And then, so does your family who still own the property, do they still grow grapes and make wine
Yes,
right
they
now?
still do. Yes.
Wow, that's wow. How many years? It's just become a
It's been
family.
since the 70s, since the very early 70s. So
So
yeah.
so it's becoming a family tradition where the
Hmm.
legacy that carried on.
That's right.
So I know that you have been worked with so many different plants yourself, coffee included, and pecan, and now you're a department head overseeing all those horticulture crops. Over all those, among all those plants, do you have a favorite and why?
Yeah, I really like actually pecan is a very interesting species that I became very attached to, not only because I studied it for a good 15 years, but also because it's one of those plants that is very the history of cultivation, but precedes actually the arrival of the Europeans. This is a species that is native to the North American continent and had a very, very important role and for Native Americans because it was a good source of food, especially during winter months, because the nuts obviously were harvested and stored, and a lot of things were made with this nuts, which are very high in fat. So they were a very important source of energy and food for Native Americans, and so I think I like that this majestic tree that is really a beautiful tree also had such an importance for Native Americans, but also for animals. Think about how much energy it provides to squirrels and birds and crows and others because it helps them sustain throughout the winter. So I really like that, and I kind of compare that to the chestnut tree. Chestnuts is a very important species in Europe, at least the European chestnut I'm talking about, and that's because also just like the pecan is still harvested from the wild. And especially during periods of hardship, I'm thinking about, let's say, World War I or other periods during centuries, during pandemics, or I'm referring to prior to the COVID pandemic. It was essential to sustain families that were living in the mountains, places where there were not many other food sources during winter. So kind of I compare the chestnut to the pecan trees because of this commercial, but also more social importance for people and animals.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and then I have to mention that the economic value of both of those are pretty important because I know, well, pecan has a pretty big role in Texas, and then you spent years studying pecan back in Texas A&M, and
Yes,
here in Georgia, pecan commodity is contributing a lot, economic speaking, to
absolutely.
our Georgia economy in general. So I
Yes.
see the reason behind why you love those. And I know you personally is a big fan of coffee, and you have done a lot of work on coffee, and you were the director of the coffee or the Borlaug Center for World Coffee Center back in Texas. And it's people out there who's listening to this, I would say 90%, if not more, are coffee drinkers. But it's such a beloved crop on the planet. But how did you first get involved in coffee research?
Yes, it was one of those things of being in the right place at the right time, I guess, because I have to give credit to Dr. Elsa Morano, who was and still is the director of the Borlaug Institute, the Norman Borlaug Institute for International Agriculture at Texas A&M University, because I had interacted with her professionally in a few instances, but when at some point the Borlaug Institute was awarded a fairly large grant from USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, which is now semi-defunct. But this was in 2014. when Central American countries, coffee-producing countries, had just witnessed a resurgence in coffee leaf rust, which is one of probably the worst diseases that can affect the coffee crop. And again, in 2012, 2013, there was one of those perfect storm that had to do with climate and developing of new strains of fungi, and then economic factors. Anyway, so the fungus became a serious concern for many of these countries. And so the Borlaug Institute, together with World Coffee Research and several of the big coffee players in the United States, joined forces, and this grant was awarded with the idea of helping 9 Central American coffee-producing countries to fight this disease and develop a more resilient industry. So at that point, they were looking for somebody at the Texas A&M campus to help co-lead this project, especially for the component that was going to take place at Texas A&M, because obviously most of the activities were going to take place in the producing countries. And so this is when she approached me. She wanted to know if I was interested in this. And the reason why she came to me, I assume, is, I guess, I hope because she trusted I could do the job, but also because I had previous experience working in Central America. I was quite fluent in Spanish. And so, she asked me, and I immediately accepted because I thought it was a very good cause and something I was very interested in. So, I just want to put a little parenthesis here and say, because some people may wonder, why is the United States interested in doing a project on a crop that is only marginally grown in the United States? Because honestly, only Hawaii and very little bit of boutique coffee production in California, but these are the only 2 states where coffee is grown in the United States. So why is the United States investing money in helping coffee producing countries in Central America? Well, there's at least a good couple of good reasons. One is because we import pretty much all the coffee that we drink, and much of this coffee comes from Central American country. So obviously it's important for us to make sure that coffee importers and coffee companies continue to have their supply. But also, according to statistics, there are over 2 million jobs in the United States that revolve around coffee, and then of course includes all the importers, but also think about all the coffee shops, the coffee roasters, all the manufacturer for the cups and the lids and the stirrers and everything else. And so it's a good reason. We want to make sure those jobs are secured. In fact, going back to the origin of this grant, when 2012, 2013, this big coffee leaf rust outbreak took place, there was a spike in migration to the United States that economists and people that study this actually directly correlated with the coffee rust. So again, it's kind of a soft approach to reduce illegal migration and also illegal being involved in illegal activities, some of the Central American countries.
Yeah, and some people may never thought science to this level. They would think that, okay, horticulture is just horticulture. It's plants and everywhere. But I'm glad that you mentioned it's just a very good example to show the impact of horticulture. We're not just people growing plants, but we help people in so many different ways, and not just in the United States, but worldwide. People are relying on those activities to have a good life, and that's our whole point as scientists, as universities, to provide all the resources to help them maintain a kind of decent life so that they can be happy. That's one of our goals. So before we get scientific, and let's go back to the daily coffee drinking type of activities. So when you take your coffee, because you have all those experience and knowledge on coffee itself, what, with all those experience and knowledge, does it change the way that you drink it from your daily routine of coffee drinking?
Yes, certainly. It taught me a lot. Also, because when I started attending conferences that are focused on coffee, you are surrounded by a real coffee connoisseur. I mean, I remember going to one of the first meetings at the Specialty Coffee Association conference, and you're in this meeting because obviously you go to conference not just to go to the trade show or attend presentation, but also you take advantage of having all these people at the same place in the same time to have meetings. So we would go to this conference and have several meetings, and with the coffee company executive or other researchers, and literally in the middle of the meeting you see these people opening their bag and they start take out their coffee grinder and they plug in their kettle in the wall. So they start heating up their water, and they literally start preparing their coffee right there in the conference in the meeting. So you definitely start thinking about, okay, maybe I should revisit the way I drink my coffee. Indeed, you become first you really start appreciating high quality coffee. Because if the coffee is good, you literally don't have to add any sugar or any creamer or milk or whatever. You just drink it straight. And that's really how you can evaluate the quality of coffee. And this is done, again, routinely by this coffee buyers, coffee expert, when they evaluate specific lots of coffee. So once you get used to, you taste good coffee, then you're kind of hooked. You say, okay, I do see a difference between, the regular store brand pre-ground coffee and something that's high quality specialty coffee that is ground right before brewing. And then, you kind of have to, but you appreciate it, and you become a little bit more refined. So yes, but it's a long answer to your question. I have learned how to drink better coffee.
Well, the reason why I ask you is because I apparently didn't directly associate with any of those research I have done, but I happen to be the roommate of one of your beloved PhD students, Sarah. And so we lived together for 3 years back in Texas A&M, and she has a specific way to drink coffee. And I kind of observed that. And then, because before I drank instant coffee with those like pre-ground coffees, and the quantity of that is not, comparable to
No, I
better
know.
coffee beans. So I kind of have to add a lot of sugar and milk to make it tastable. But right now, but after that, I start to, get some sense of like appreciate better coffee beans and coffees. And now I for all the coffee that I drink, at least at home, I don't need to add any sugar. And sometimes now I just add some little bit milk just to do the art that I like. I do like the latte art
Nice.
just for fun. But it definitely changed the way that I look at coffee myself. So with the coffee, it all comes from the coffee plant. And you briefly mentioned some of the big players worldwide to produce coffee. Can you show us the big picture of like where those coffee plants and those coffee are produced worldwide, and they starting from the coffee plant itself?
Yes. So the coffee plant, most of the coffee comes from Coffea arabica. The majority of the coffee we drink, is certainly specialty coffee, comes from the Coffea arabica species, which is one of 133 species there in the Coffea genus. Okay, so 133, most of them are actually from the African continent. They're all native to Africa, but actually one important place for Coffea species is Madagascar. Madagascar has 67 of the 133 species of coffee. Now, I talk about this 133 species, but the ones that are cultivated, actually, it's only about 3, really. So it's Coffea arabica, which supplies about 65% of the coffee that is consumed in the world. Coffea canephora, which is known as Robusta, which is pretty much the remaining 35. Then there's a third one, is Coffea liberica, which is really less than 1%, and it's only consumed locally. There's not a market for it. The reason why Arabica is the most common one is definitely because of the quality, is the mildest of all the Coffea. The other ones have either a higher content of caffeine, which you think, oh, great, I get a bigger boost, but it's also associated with bitterness. The higher content of caffeine doesn't necessarily translate into a better cup quality. So yeah, you asked me where they coming from. As I mentioned, the Coffea is pretty much the African continent. Obviously, Coffea arabica is from what is now Ethiopia. That's where it came from. So, sometimes we, especially for people that are not familiar with coffee production, you think about, Colombian coffee or Guatemalan coffee, Brazilian coffee. But if you think about it, none of these countries actually had coffee to begin with. It was all introduced between the late 1700 and mid 1800 as an additional source of obviously income, and because once they realized that coffee was actually growing well, they started replacing existing crops or maybe cutting down forests, unfortunately, to grow coffee. So that's and still today, Brazil is the largest coffee producer in the world, produces about 1/3, if I'm not wrong. I don't have the numbers, but maybe even more, actually. So second to Brazil is actually Vietnam is the second largest producer of coffee, but mainly Robusta, so the Coffea canephora. So we usually don't drink Vietnam coffee because, again, it's used to produce Robusta or Coffea canephora. And the Coffea canephora is almost never drank as pure coffee, but it is blended with the Arabica for kind of inferior blends or espresso blends and things like that.
Are you saying that if people want to, for instance, kind of get a taste of better coffee, if they go to a grocery store, they just need to look for Ethiopia coffee beans instead of?
It doesn't have to be necessarily coming from Ethiopia. Ethiopia coffee is definitely high quality most of the time. Coffee is a major contributor to Ethiopian economy. It's a huge component of their GDP because they export literally millions of pounds every year, and it's definitely high quality. But you can get very high quality coffee from Central America, for example. So yeah, Colombian and Panama, Guatemala, Costa Rica, just to name a few, Honduras, El Salvador. I have to be careful because I have so many colleagues and friends from all those countries that I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget their countries.
As you were naming those countries,
who am I forgetting? Nicaragua, Mexico.
So basically, coffee as a plant, and it grows mainly in those tropical areas where they provide the environmental conditions for them to thrive. But when we talk about that, what kind of environmental conditions does the coffee plant really need to thrive in? What does those environment conditions play a role in determining the quantity of the coffee down the road?
Yes, that's a very good question, and you are correct. Obviously, just like all plants, there are some conditions that are ideal for the particular species to thrive. In case, I'm just going to focus on the two, Coffea arabica and Coffea canephora. The two species are quite different in terms of their ecological preferences and growing condition, because Coffea arabica evolved or came from the western highlands of Ethiopia, which is a mountainous, cloud forest type of environment. So definitely higher altitude, frequent cloudy days, never too hot. And these are the conditions where the Arabica coffee thrives. So temperatures, let's say, averaging between 70 and 80 degrees, undercover, because this is a shade plant that evolved under the cover of larger trees in the forest. So this is why shade-grown, mountain-grown Arabica coffee is really where you can get the highest quality, even though it might be the same identical species genetically, or clonally propagated. Obviously, it would develop different coffee, and the chemical structure of the fruits, the seeds actually, because maybe not everybody knows that the coffee beans is actually the seed of the plant, which of course turns into the quality of the brewed coffee. In case of Coffea canephora, Robusta, actually, Robusta comes from a much, much larger geographical region, which is pretty much all equatorial Africa. So you find native Robusta plants all the way from West Africa, but again, all equatorial. So, but typically in lowlands, not in the mountains like Arabica. So that's the reason why Robusta coffee the Robusta species, the canephora species, can tolerate higher temperature, but also one of the reasons why it's a lot more resistant to pests and diseases than the Arabica is, because it comes from a much larger geographical region that you can find different ecotypes or plants that have been exposed to diseases and insects. It's a much broader genetic pool than the Arabica, which only come from a very, very small region. So that's a lot of also a kind of inbreeding that had to do with it. So Arabica is actually a lot of the current, the modern varieties that we have a little bit of Robusta genes in it because of hybridization that has helped increase resistance in the Arabica to diseases and pests. So,
yeah. And I would assume that folks out there who drink coffee every day, they may not have the privilege like me actually seeing a coffee plant in the house, because I was able to see the coffee plant producing flower, and I was quite surprised to see how tiny little like white flowers like scattered around the plant. And again, the coffee plant, it's a tropical plant, and so you can imagine the leaves are pretty big and then glowy, and compared to the glowy showy leaves, those tiny little flowers are like pretty small. But then I was looking at them like, oh my gosh, all those little tiny flowers turn into the coffee beans that we consume so much around the world. It just surprised me. And I know that botanic gardens, at least in Atlanta Botanic Garden, in the tropical room or the greenhouse, they have some one or two coffee plants for people to look at. So next time if you go there, check them out, and then you probably it'll change your perception of drinking coffee next morning. So we talk about a lot of the coffee plant itself, but can you give us an overview of, walk us through of how the coffee, from the coffee plant all the way to become in the cup? Can you just walk us through the whole process?
Yes, I'll have to be quick because obviously there's several steps that take place from the field to the cup. Let's start just a little bit before harvest. I just want to give a brief introduction on how the coffee plant grows. As is considered a shrub or a small sized tree. And it takes about between 2 and 3 years for the plants to develop the first flowers that you just mentioned. And then it continue producing for several years, 15, 20, 30. But obviously for commercial purposes, you need to, at some point, you either need to prune it back so that the plant doesn't become too big, which will become very difficult to harvest, but also to kind of rejuvenate a lot of the tissues. So there's several growers that, they cut it pretty much to the stump, at the stump level, and let it, regrow and kind of rejuvenate. I wish we could do the same too. We could just cut a limb and then, get new, younger, stronger. But anyway,
cut our hair.
right. So after a coffee is harvested is a very delicate process because for those who are listening that have never seen a coffee fruit, it's very similar to a cherry. In fact, we also talk about coffee cherry. So you have the seeds, which in case of coffee, unlike a cherry, the cherry only has one seed, one pit, but the coffee plant has two. So there are two seeds facing each other, and that's why when you look at a coffee bean, one side is flat, one side is curved, because the two flat sides, they face each other. So they have two seeds next to each other, and then everything is surrounded by a pulp. And this process has to be done immediately after harvest. So you have to find ways to process the seeds very quickly, because otherwise this pulp, obviously you think about it, you have a tissue, a plant tissue that is rich in sugar, very watery, and if you let it sit there, especially after it's been bruised because of harvesting, it starts rotting, okay, and fermenting, which would be obviously a disastrous for the quality of the coffee. So it has to be processed immediately, and without getting into too many details, but this can be done in at least three main ways. Okay, one, it could be you take the fruits, you harvest the fruit with the pulp, and you immediately put them on a usually it's done in concrete patios in the sun to let it dry. Okay, and in this way, the obviously it has to be a pretty thin layer, about a couple of inches, maybe less, so that all the coffee fruits, they start drying. And this is a process that can take 2-3 weeks depending on the weather. So the pulp, the fleshy part, starts drying out, and it dries on the seeds. And this confers a particular flavor characteristics to the coffee that will be brewed after that. This is called natural processing, okay? And that's typical in those countries where they don't have a lot of access to water. For example, Yemen is a big producer of coffee, or even other African countries. So it can be, again, the coffee fruits are laid either on raised beds or concrete patios where they dry. The other process, which is called honey process, what they do, they immediately run the coffee fruit through a depulper that removes the pulp and separates the pulp from the seeds, and then the seeds, which are covered by a mucilage, which is actually a pectin, just like the one that we use for canning and making jams, then it's laid in the sun to dry. Okay, this is called honey processing. And then the third process, which is definitely the most common one, is called washed coffee. So the pulp are immediately removed from the seeds, and then the seeds with the mucilage on top actually get placed in tanks where they covered with water, and so they actually soak in water for a period between 24 and 48 hours, and they undergo a fermentation process in which the yeasts that are present naturally. In some cases, they're actually added on the fruit. They break down this mucilage, and by doing this, when the seeds are underwater, they also transform the chemistry of the beans. So after whatever process you do, at some point, obviously the seeds have to be dried to about 10 to 12% to make sure that the seed is no longer viable, it's dead, okay? So it doesn't germinate, but also to prevent spoilage. Okay, so there's an additional drying which is done either on the patios and under the sun or in dryer with heaters. And then at that point, the coffee is ready to be bagged and shipped. Now, for this is, again, this might be a little bit complicated to follow, but for the coffee that was processed naturally, the one that still had the dry pulp attached, now there's another step that has to be, this dried pulp has to be removed. So there are machines to remove the dry skin and then remove the parchment so that they can also be, bagged and then shipped. So in a nutshell, all this is happening in the producing country, okay, as close as possible to the farms, because as I said, this process, the post-harvest process has to be started as soon as possible. Now, after the seeds or the coffee beans, at this point we can call them coffee beans, are in the 60 kilo bag, they can be stored locally, but also they can be shipped on obviously the shipping containers all over the world. They can reach their destination, whether it's Norway or, whatever, they point on this big, obviously, ships that can take it all over the world. So it's a lot of work. And this is just to get to destination, because once it gets to destination, then it's stored again in warehouses. And at that point is distributed to the roasters, because coffee is shipped when it's still green. Okay, not green meaning like green beans, meaning they're not roasted. They look kind of greenish, and they don't taste, they don't smell anything like coffee. It actually, if you put a green coffee bean in your mouth, it's very hard, first of all, but also it's got a kind of grassy flavor. So only after roasting is when you start getting all the aroma and the flavor characteristics that are typical of coffee. So, and then of course, after it's roasted, it's...
And when you were describing the process of how coffee has been, or the post-harvest process of the coffee being treated, I wanted to kind of rephrase the process in a different way, where people would visually can imagine the whole process. Here's what I was thinking while you were describing the whole process. I was thinking there's 3 ways for coffee being produced after harvest. And so those are the 3 ways of producing coffee. And then after that, it all packed and shipped to the destination, and people can start roasting it. But in terms of roast, I know there are 3 main way of roasting?
Not really. I mean, there's roasting is pretty much one procedure. You have this big roaster. Many of them are called drum roasters, which is imagine a dryer like the one that you have house for clothes. It's the same concept. You have a source of heat, which is either generated by gas or electricity. And the main difference with the clothes dryer is the temperature is a lot higher. It gets to about 400 degrees Fahrenheit for coffee. And so once the green coffee beans are dumped or in the dryer, you can, or the roaster, the head roaster can play with 2 variables, temperature and time. So you can have a lower temperature and you keep the beans longer in the dryer. And when I say longer, we're talking about between, let's say, 18 and 20, 21, 22 minutes. Okay, so each cycle is about that long. So again, you keep the temperature a little bit lower, but high enough that you still have a roasting process. You don't want to have a temperature, let's say, of 300 degrees, because you would just barely bake, it wouldn't trigger the chemical transformation. So, or you can decide to have a higher temperature for a shorter period of time. It should really be, how do you like your coffee roasted? Okay. And if this changes, any coffee shop, any coffee roaster would have a target roasting level, which is based on their preference, based on their customers, based on what they're trying to do. For a large roaster, the largest roaster in the world is probably Starbucks, because they source their coffee from so many different farms around the world, from different varieties. What do they do to make sure that if you go to a coffee shop and you order, let's say, a Verona blend, it always tastes like a Verona blend? What they do, they tend to over roast a little bit. So that's really the reason why, if you go to a Starbucks, their coffee is always on the kind of again, over roasted, kind of a cherry burnt, because by doing this, that's the only way they can put all this different varieties and different origins together and make sure that the Verona blend always tastes pretty much like the Verona blend. But a small coffee shop can afford to roast like a medium roast, which is considered ideally to really savor the quality, because they use smaller, they source it from smaller farms. Or if one year they say we don't have this blend because that farm had a disease outbreak or whatever, they can always replace it with another one, and just inform their customers. So there are all those business decisions that really drive roasting. But as I say, it's a fairly simple process. The operator, or the roaster, or the owner decide how they want to, roast their coffee based on their preference and their customer's preference. But that's about it.
But what is the difference between, let's say, light, medium, and dark roasted coffee? It's I think
again, it's a combination of time, the time that those beans stay in the roaster, and the temperature. So basically,
what would that need to the taste of the coffee?
Oh, that's it definitely changes, because you can really follow, and of course, there's been research done, but the one thing that does not change is the caffeine content. Caffeine is actually present in the beans already when they're green, because caffeine why does the coffee plant and other caffeine is not only produced by the coffee plant mainly, but there are others. It is caffeine is an alkaloid that is used as a natural deterrent against pests and diseases. Okay, so that's present in the plant to begin with, and it's present in the leaves, but mostly in the seeds. Because what is the purpose of every living organism on this planet is to reproduce. So obviously, it's in the plant's interest to pack those seeds with caffeine, so they will less likely be attacked by insects and diseases. Okay, so you have this caffeine that's in the bean. It's about 1.5% of the dry content of a coffee bean, so it's significant. So that caffeine content does not change during roasting, luckily for us, because caffeine is pretty stable at high temperature. But what changes is, for example, the level of acidity. Acidity is actually a good trait for coffee. The high, usually you have the best coffees are the ones that have a high acidity. Which is counterintuitive. It's like, wait a minute, if you think about, let's say, orange juice or lemon juice, like the more acid it is, like might be more bitter. But for coffee is the opposite. So the longer you keep those beans in the roaster, the lower the acidity of the brewed coffee will become. So that also tells you that the quality of the brewed coffee is going to be inferior. For coffees that are roasted, let's say, a French roast, or even an Italian roast, which is the extreme, really, before it burns. So for light to medium coffee is really when you can savor all the properties that are in that cup. So that's why that's the one that is recommended if you're really trying to assess the quality of a coffee.
So basically, the acidity does not have something to do with the time. It's more has something. It's more related to the
The
time
degree of
inside
roasting. Yes.
the
Yeah,
roasting.
the degree,
Okay.
which again could be, you can have a highly, a dark roasted or French roasted coffee bean by increasing the temperature, keeping it high for a shorter period of time, or reducing a little bit by keeping. Imagine baking a cake. I mean, you could bake a cake instead of, if the recipe says 20 minutes at 400 degrees, you could say, well, I could put it at 480 and keep it for 10, or you could keep it at 350 for 30 minutes. But are the three cakes going to be the same? Probably not, because if you do it at 480 or whatever I said for 10 minutes, most likely the outside is going to be burned, but the inside is not. And maybe the opposite is going to be for the one that you keep the longest. It might be too dry, so it's really a lot of playing. And what roasters do when they get a new batch of coffee, maybe a variety they had never used before, or maybe a farm that they haven't bought from before, what they do, they just do a little scientific experiment. They take a batch and they roast it. And of course, they would not use the big roaster to play with. They are small roasters, like you can put, like a bench top that only do, let's say, 200 grams, 300 grams, or even less. And you play with it. You play with all this. And then at the end, you sample, you try the cup, and you say, okay, that's the one I want. So at that point, you develop your recipe and you transfer it to the big roaster.
So for listeners who have listened to this episode, what kind of message do you want to give to the listeners who is a daily coffee drinker? Let's say they're going to drink coffee tomorrow. What should they remember about coffee?
One thing that I could probably recommend is next time you buy a coffee in a bag, look at the package. And before you buy one, just try to educate yourself whether the package says, first, does it say 100% Arabica, which already tells you something. Because there are a lot of coffees out there that they don't say, they just say 100% coffee. If they say 100% coffee, that means that there's some Robusta in it. Okay, so that's definitely going to change. Also, see if it says, if it specifies the country where the coffee is from. So maybe next time you can compare two different countries. But of course, it may be, you cannot really compare two countries because, for example, you could get some, from the store, medium roast Ethiopian, and then you have a dark roast Guatemalan. So when you compare them, do you really compare the country or do you compare the roast level?
Yeah. It's kind of like a experiment.
Yeah, exactly. You understand very well. You're obviously a scientist. So, but first of all, again, educate yourself. But also, if you go to a coffee shop that is, is not like a large chain, like a chain, try to see if the barista knows a little bit about coffee, ask questions. Or, do you have different origins? Do you have different, how do you, and unfortunately, in most cases, the employees are just, I don't want to say students because they're students that are very educated, but maybe they just need a job. So they might not know, but they might actually trigger their curiosity. And next time they see their supervisor, maybe they'll ask, they say, oh, a customer asked me, where do we get our coffees? What can you tell me more about it? So again, educate. There's so much work behind a cup of coffee and so much sweat and time spent in the field, just like for all horticulture crops. Never forget that behind anything we eat, there's a farmer, whether it's a steak or, an orange that has spent a lot of time in the field, really taking time away from their family, from watching TV or whatever, just because of they're very passionate what they do. And let's never forget that we should always remember about our farmers and support them.
Yeah, and all those, again, it's the same concept where the information that I keep sending out repeatedly. Just appreciate what you have, because everything that you say daily, day in and day out, is tons of work from other people, especially in horticulture world. And I know Leo is a great researcher himself, but in addition to that, he's also a very good boss and great admin or department head. And since you joined UGA, you have, I don't know, developed and initiated many wonderful programs and activities. But what is your next excitement with your role at UGA?
Ooh. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm glad that you think I'm a good supervisor, administrator. Hopefully, this is not just for the show.
No. Yes, you are.
Thank you. I think our department is in a very good state right now. I'm proud to say that in 6 years, we added 18 new faculty members, including you, which bring a lot of energy, a lot of new ideas. There's nothing better than, as a supervisor, to surround yourself with people that are smarter and better than you, because they make you look good. So if you all are doing well and are successful, it's very easy for me to brag about the department and go to my supervisor when I have to provide reports and everything else, because you guys make me look good. So that's really, at this point, my goal, to make sure that everybody has access to the resource that they need. At least, obviously we all would like to have maybe a better lab or a larger greenhouse or new vehicles. We cannot do it all, but at least have enough that we can sustain high quality programs and really help Georgia growers and even outside of Georgia, the state, the country, and internationally. So that's really all. And also, I think we all have a mission, all of us in horticulture, to make sure we continue to promote horticulture as a discipline, because many of our students don't, I'm talking about undergraduate students, they don't discover us until they're ready at the university and they stumble upon a class or a roommate. They describe what horticulture is, and then they come to us and they love it and they never leave once they come with us, because that's really, my gosh, this is exactly what I wanted to do. And it's so therapeutic working with plants. So that's really what we're going to continue doing, make sure that we advocate for our industry and our discipline.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons, or one of the missions for the podcast and a lot of other activities. We want to deliver the message to a larger audience, to the public, say horticulture is a thing and it's a fun thing. So people need to take a serious look at us, and hopefully we lure more future horticulturists to our world. So with that in mind, if people want to find more about horticulture in general and or follow up on some of the work that you have done in the past or in the future, where do you recommend them go and look for?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, our website is the easiest way to learn more about our department and all the faculty, including you, what they're doing. Obviously, they can Google it, Horticulture UGA, or go to hort.caes.uga.edu. Over there, they can find links to all the faculty profiles, our academic programs, and I also have we try to put out a newsletter at least a couple of times a year. So all those that are connected to UGA can get a copy of that. So obviously electronic.
And I'll put all the link out there in the show notes so people can find information easy, and I can also put your profile there if they want to have a direct contact to you about potential opportunities down the road. But thank you, Leo, for taking time of out of your busy schedule to talk with us and educate us on coffee and show us all those wonderful things that going on within UGA. And I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Conversation like this only happen when you support the show. For more information and find ways to support us, please go to bnbpod.com, bnbpod.com. If you like what you are hearing, spread the word and share this podcast with the people you love. Make sure you hit that subscription button and give a review for the podcast. And as always, go check out the show notes to learn more about this topic and other topics we featured on the show at bnbpod.com. Thank you for listening. Till the next time, stay healthy and go plants.